So good, guys. So good. Well, welcome. My name is Patrick, and I'm the pastor here. I'm just so glad you're here. My mom watches online. She's traveling somewhere, but I know she'll see us. I wore my fancy jacket for you, Mom. And we have two other campuses. You may not know that. We have one in Elkins High School that's about to move into a permanent home at Easter. They're meeting there. It's our River Pointe, Missouri City. And we have another campus downtown at Shepherd and Washington Drive. We call that West End. So if you know somebody in the loop, tell them about that. They're not having near as fun as we are today, but it's a great place to be. I'm so glad that you're here. This is a great thing I look forward to every year, this Martin Luther King weekend. We just want to celebrate this. We live in the most racially diverse county in the United States of America. Can you believe that? And when I started the church, I tell people I grew up in an all-white neighborhood with all-white friends and all-white schools. I've been white most of my life, so it's like, why did God put me down here? And look what God's done. You can look around here and see a miracle. This is what heaven's going to look like, by the way. It's like the United Nations here. So I'm so thrilled and honored to be in this church where I can learn from people from different backgrounds, and it's just been amazing. We're in a series called Follow, and I thought it just fit perfectly to what we were talking about and following Jesus. Now, here's the reality: is the word Christian has gotten so messed up, nobody knows what it means anymore, right? What does that label mean? So I'm moving away from that idea and saying when Jesus showed up, he wanted to establish a relationship. And so when he died on the cross, was buried and rose again, it was about forgiveness for us so we can have a relationship with him who's holy and perfect and lacking in nothing. And so we are cleansed by the fact that somebody else did the work for us and paid the price for us. And that opened up, because of the resurrection, that opened up the opportunity for us to have a relationship with God that's real and relevant. Religion is this idea of noting what happened in the past, standards and morals and values and principles and practices and traditions. But a relationship is dynamic and connected to our everyday real life. And so when Jesus said, hey, come follow me, he was inviting you and me to an adventure that we had no idea where it would lead or where it would go, but it would make us different people and give us the abundant life that Jesus came to give. A whole life where shame is gone and forgiveness is real, but a life of adventure, a life of the unexpected, a life of the supernatural, a life of the miracle. And so when Jesus showed up to do this, he reached across these racial barriers and boundaries, and he really put religious people in their place. He really changed the whole system for us 2,000 years ago. And Dr. King built upon that in the 60s and changed our country because he reached across these barriers and said, this isn't the way we should live. So I want to just tell you a story about when Jesus reached across this barrier. It's one of my favorite stories in the narrative that John wrote. One of his best friends, Jesus' best friends, wrote this story, this first-hand account, eyewitness account. I said one eye. Did y'all not laugh? I thought that was funny. It's like a pirate out there, Anyway, so no, John wasn't one-eyed. Okay, anyway. So John wrote this narrative, and he tells us this story, and let's see if we can't be helped today by it. Here's what it says in John 4. Now he had to go through Samaria. Jesus had to go through Samaria. He had come to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there, a famous well you can read about in the Old Testament. And Jesus, tired as he was from his journey, sat down by the well, and it was about noon. When the Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. And the Samaritan woman said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" And then here's sort of a commentator's note from John. He says, "For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." And so This is an amazing story. Jesus had been traveling. Now, usually Jews would not even travel through Samaria. They would avoid it, even though this was the shortest route to where they were going. And when they got to this well, the disciples left to buy some food, and this Samaritan woman showed up. Now, we know a couple of things about the Samaritan woman that's helpful just from the account and knowing the tradition of the day. One, we know she came to the well at noon. Well, this was an odd time to go get water. It was the heat of the day. You don't travel to the well at the heat of the day. We know the woman was alone, which was also very unusual. And we know that she was a Samaritan, which is pointed out here in the narrative that Samaritans and Jews don't have any interaction. But not only was this Samaritan woman there alone, what we can deduce, and we'll know about this a little bit later, is that she was isolated. This woman was a woman living in isolation. She didn't have any of her Samaritan friends with her, and we'll figure out why in just a minute. And we see her at noon coming by herself. So she didn't even have a teenager to help drag the water back. You know, I mean, she was really an isolated woman. So when Jesus says, "Will you give me a drink?" He was tired and thirsty. This was quite a surprise for the woman, because a rabbi would not even speak to his wife, let alone any woman, in public. And a Jew certainly wouldn't speak to a Samaritan, and a Jewish man certainly wouldn't speak to a Samaritan woman. Now, what is happening here is this racial divide that happened. The Jews simply hated the Samaritans, and the Samaritans simply hated the Jews, based upon where they were born, based on their nationality, based on, so to speak, the color of their skin, although the color of skin was very similar. You know, it was because the Jews saw the Samaritans as half-breeds. They were Jewish, but they had gone off and married into the pagan culture, and they had created this half-breed. So Jewish people, the religious people, God's people, right? They hated the Samaritans. They hated the Gentiles, right? They treated women poorly. And Jesus came to reach across these barriers to this woman in isolation and say, "Hey, can you give me a drink?" Now, he's getting at something different. Now, here's the story. If you read it on your own, here's the story. This woman had actually didn't have a great moral reputation. Because Jesus says to her later in the story, he says, "I'd like to speak to your husband." And she says, "I have no husband." And Jesus, being God, says, "Well, I know that. You've actually had 5 husbands." So this woman got around, okay? She's one of them. You know what I'm talking about? You know, the Bible gets saucy at times, you know, to say, "Hey, this is one of them." You know what I'm talking about, right? And so the reason this woman was in such isolation from even her own people is that she didn't live up to the standards of her people. And they kicked her out. And Jesus reached across. He reached across this barrier of nationality and this barrier of morality to connect and intersect with this woman. So the woman asked this simple question: "Why do you speak to me? I'm a Samaritan and you're a Jew." Here's what Jesus says in response. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." If you knew. Now notice here that the question was from the woman, "Why do you speak to me? I'm a Samaritan woman." And he doesn't address that in his response. He doesn't sit down and say, "Well, let me tell you why." He just says, "If you knew." Now, remember, for generations, the Samaritan and the Jewish people had been taught to hate, to divide, to oppress. And the Jews, being the religious order of the day, had the power. And it was like one of those deals where Jesus said, "If you only knew. If you knew the gift of God, if you knew who I was," is what he is saying. "If you knew that I was the Savior, the Messiah, the promised one. If you knew this, these cultural barriers, these barriers between us that allow us to live our lives independently would fall away because of the bigger picture that God is with you, that the law of God, the divine nature of God's love is so much more powerful and should be obeyed more so than some cultural norm. Some sort of practice that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. If you knew. See, Jesus here, although he asked for water, understood that this woman was really the one that had a spiritual thirst. That she had tried to meet all of her needs. I'm presuming a little bit here, but go with me. All of her needs through men. She was thinking that another husband, a different man, a different relationship, a different experience would satisfy her. And here she sat at this well on this day when Jesus shows up, totally unsatisfied with her life. And Jesus calls her out on that and says, I know you're dissatisfied with your life. If you knew the gift of God, then you would be able to experience living water, one that quenches you. So the first takeaway for me with this story is this idea. What are the things that you're looking for, and I'm looking for, in our life that we believe, falsely so, that's going to satisfy the longings of our soul? Is it another relationship? Is it a pleasurable experience? Is it more money? Is it another marriage? I mean, what is it? Because we're looking, and is it Christians, which I hate that word, Christians, we're asking God to give us the things that we think we need to make our life better. And he's looking at you today and saying, if you only knew the gift of God that's here, right here with you, all these other things would pale in comparison to the thing that you search. And so Jesus did this amazing thing. I just don't think we can appreciate it fully. He did this amazing thing. He reached across what the world said was a barrier and a boundary and a place you don't cross. And he intersected with this Samaritan woman who lived in isolation. And he says, I've got something better for you in your life. And that woman goes home and tells everybody, by the way. So here's the first thing. If you're going to follow Jesus in your life, you got to know this. The world gets it wrong. Don't take your cues from our culture. Don't take your cues from the world. I know there's so much socially acceptable things, and that's a moving target, isn't it? Everything that was acceptable in the 1950s is different than they are today. Hello? You got that? So if you're taking your cues from the world of what's acceptable, what's healthy, what's good, then from the world, if you're taking those cues from the world, you're going to be left behind. You will not follow Jesus. You'll ask Jesus for his blessing. We all want that. You'll ask Jesus for help. We all need that. But if following Jesus allows you to say, I'm not going to follow the cues and the patterns of this world. I'm going to follow Jesus. And when they are crossed, when following Jesus means I can't follow the ways of the world, I'm going to leave the ways of the world behind and I'm going to follow Jesus. That's what we appreciate about Dr. King. The Dr. King in the 1960s said, this isn't the way people should live just based upon the color of their skin. That even though we've been emancipated as slaves, we're oppressed by a nation. And the powerful has taken the power that they have because of the majority, and they have oppressed instead of served. You see, if God ever gives you power in your job or in your life, he's given it to you for one reason, to serve other people, not to oppress other people, not to get your way or to have your life more comfortable. The things that God's given you is for the benefit of others, not for the benefit of you. And that makes your life bigger and better. And Dr. King, with all courage, gave his life for the fact that says, I'd rather die than live like this. I can't live like this anymore. And so him and thousands of others had the courage. Now, again, I've been a Caucasian a long time. Can I say Caucasian? I don't even know what the right terms are. I like white, but I feel like sometimes it got to be proper. Caucasian, African American, black. I don't know. So confusing. But I can't jump. I get it. So that's it. I got limitations. You know. So I don't fully appreciate what Dr. King did. But I read the stories. I can't imagine how difficult it was for that lady to ride at the front of the bus and refused to go back. I can't imagine how difficult it was for people to drink from the fountain that was designated for whites or go to the bathroom in a place that was designated for other people. I can't imagine what it meant to go to prison or jail or spend time in a hospital because they stood up against the world, the culture that they lived in, and said, no more. We can't live like this anymore. And they reached across a barrier that religious people had enforced. And they said, no, we're not going to live like this anymore. And we're benefiting today because somebody said the world has got it wrong, and we're going to make it right. It's the people of God who do that. It's the ones that are following Christ, and we're not done. I mean, if you're here and you think that all prejudice and all racial hatred is gone from our country, you're living in a bubble. There's a lot of work to do, and so God's leading all of us when we see somebody oppressed, when we see somebody that doesn't get a fair shake, when we see somebody that's not treated equally because of where they were born or how they were born or what they look like, it is the people of God's obligation to stand up and say, no more. We're not going to do this. Whatever it costs me. Whatever it costs me, I'm willing to pay that price because people aren't going to live like this. And I'll tell you something, I don't know much, but I know this. The poor in this country have it hard. They don't get a fair shake. They don't get the opportunities that you and I have. And you and I have to stand up, and our stomach's got to turn, and our heart's got to break. And we said, I can't live in my comfortable place as long as this is going on. I got to do something here. And when Dr. King did that, you see, when Dr. King did that, man, I'm telling you, it shook our country. I was born in 1964, so I don't remember much of it, but some of you do. You see, that's how it works. Here's the warning. If you want to follow Jesus, you cannot follow the patterns of this world. You just can't do it. They will some point cause you. Now, you can enjoy the things of this world without being in this world, or being in this world without being of this world, but you cannot say, well, what's wrong with that? Everybody's doing it. Well, that's how they got to this bad place. So we as a people of God have to say, God, what is it that you want me to do? Here's the second thing. I got to move on here. And the second thing is this: you got to move beyond what you know. You see, prejudice and racial bigotry and hatred come from a place of arrogance. They come from a place of thinking that you know it all, that you know something. See, and this is hard. The older you get, the more you know. And I'm 55 this year in June 12th. Write it down. And so, you know, I'm in a place where I feel like I have a good life experience, I have a good education, I have lived life, I've made some mistakes, and I know a lot. Now, my kids don't think I know anything, but I feel like, and that's actually a hindrance. Because the more you know, the more you think you know. And here's the thing, God's not limited by your life experience or your realm of knowledge or your understanding or your intellect or your education. The God operates beyond all that. So anytime we think we know something, then we feel like we can make a judgment on other people based upon the color of their skin or how they look or the accent that they use. And it's arrogance. And it prevents us from getting to know somebody's name or hearing their story or listening to their journey because we think we know. We think we know. See, here's the thing. When Jesus reached across this, even his disciples would not have done that at this point. In fact, it became a big fight later as to who gets to accept Jesus or not. But even the disciples would not have accepted this woman. And Jesus reached across, and he knew that this woman was hurting and needed life. See, that's what being teachable does for you and I. It's like, well, I don't know. I think I know, but I don't know, but I'm going to learn. See, when you follow Jesus, this is going to be tweetable. I just feel it. Listen. When you follow Jesus, y'all ready? He's going to take you into the unknown, a place you've never been. He's going to take you to people you never met. And you're going to do things you have never done. So if you're satisfied with where you are, or if you think your knowledge, you know it all, you're just going to ask God to keep you on the merry-go-round, keeping you going round and round. And Jesus is saying, no, get off. I got new experiences for you. This is what's going to keep you young, by the way. I've got a new adventure for you. I've got a new way for you. I've got a new direction for you. But you're going to have to leave that merry-go-round, I can't say that, merry-go-round, and come follow me. You're going to have to come on and follow me. No. I know what's going to make me happy. Here's what I need you to do for me, God. Is God's going, you're so dumb. Listen, not sure God says that, but he has with me, I know. He's like, so dumb. You can sit there all you want and just keep going around and around, trying to accumulate and have more and all that stuff. I got this other thing over here for you that's an amazing adventure of faith. In fact, here's what Martin Luther King said. He said, faith is taking the first steps even when you don't see the whole staircase. And we just want to see the whole staircase. I have a good friend named Ed Vaughn. Ed and I have been to Cuba a bunch of times together. A few months ago, I said, Ed, what have you been doing? He's retired. He said, oh, nothing. I ain't been doing nothing. I said, Ed, that's a lie. What have you been doing? You're always busy. He said, well, this amazing thing has happened with me. I've been working at a cemetery, just helping clean up a cemetery. I thought, well, Ed, he's in the 70s. Are you getting ready for something here, Ed? I mean, it's just, are you digging? I mean, what's going on? He said, no. And he said, God has done something in my life over the last year that I cannot explain. And I said, well, explain it to me. And when he did, I thought, that's what it's like to follow God. So I asked him to sit down and let us record this story so you could get a picture of what it means to follow Jesus. Watch this story. It's amazing.
Walking along, I come to my turnaround, and for some reason I kind of slowed down, and I stopped, and I looked over to my left, and I could see a field that I had noticed before but didn't pay any attention to. It was kind of grown up with trees and scrub and brush and things. But for some reason that particular day, I decided to go take a look. My way up to the field was kind of muddy, but I kept going, and I got to the edge, and I started walking in, and I looked down, and I could see there was a grave marker. And then as I looked across, I could see some headstones. And it was a cemetery, but it was in bad shape, a lot of neglect. There was a big tree up toward the middle, and I made my way up there. And I stood under that tree, and I looked at all this, and my thought was of the people who were buried there, and what a shame it was that disrespectful for them. It was just overwhelming, the neglect. And I just kind of shook my head that, it was a shame, and I walked away. A week later, I decided to do my 3-mile walk again. I come to my turnaround point. This time I stopped. And I remember I had my hands on my hips. And at first I said, no, don't go back up there. But I did. Do what you can. Those words just kept coming to my mind and all. And so I'd go up and do what I can. When I first would go up there, it got very lonely because you're the only one there, and you're in the middle of the field. There's no cars going by. There's nothing. And I thought, well, I wonder whose cemetery this is. These people that are buried here, do they have families? Where are their families? I'd never see anybody. Now, I wasn't up there every day, but I was up there a lot. I never saw anybody. And then that's when I would go back to the tree and sit down on the top of that headstone and I'd say, I need some help. You've got to help me. Give me some answers. I said, I just don't know what to do. And it was like, at what point are you going to give me some help? At what point are you going to give me a little direction? And if nobody's coming, why am I here? Why am I working out here for nobody? I couldn't get any answers. And I remember at some point, my wife, she said, do you think you need to go 3 or 4 times a week? And I said, well, Karen, I said, I can't get it out of my mind. It just won't leave. And I said, I don't understand it, but it won't leave. I've got to keep doing something. Early last spring, I was out working in the cemetery, and I hear a car door. And I look up, and I see a man and woman walking in the cemetery. And the man's holding some flowers.
Out the corner of my eye, I could see this guy working, kind of scruffy looking, kind of dirty looking and everything.
And I get up and dust myself off, and I start walking over.
Who is this guy? He don't look like he fit here. It was a black cemetery, of course, and here it is, I see this white guy out here. He didn't know it had to do with slaves, and he didn't know the history of the cemetery and everything. And I'm looking around, and maybe somebody's been buried there that I don't know about, and I'm like, I'm not sure if he's at the right cemetery, or maybe he's a caretaker that I don't know about. But, he walked over, and like I said, I had that deer in the headlight look when I go, yes, sir, and he's, and introduced himself and everything, but he just didn't seem to fit in as part of that cemetery as far as I knew about.
He said, what is it you do here, Mr. Vaughn? And I said, whatever I can. I said, for some reason, the Lord has put it on my heart to get involved with this cemetery and do what I can.
And that let me know that he was a God-fearing man right then and there. So he kind of dismissed himself and walked away and went back to doing what he was doing, to give me a moment with my dad and everything. And after putting flowers on my dad's grave, something just touched me. And
I remember he shook his head and he said, Mr. Vaughn, he said,
I say, do you mind if I help you?
I just looked up and I went, thank you. And he said, when are you working next? And I said, Saturday morning.
Okay, didn't expect it to be that soon, but next Saturday I came, and the following Saturday I came, and I came again, and I came again.
The family wanted to bury his father there, and he didn't. He said, I was supposed to because of the condition.
But now I think I know the reason why, and it was for God had a purpose.
He said, Ed, he said, I know now why God wanted me to bury my father here. He said he wanted to put you in my life. And I said, Mark, he put you in my life too. And he took his arms and he gave me a big hug. And he said, I love you, man. And I'm a real emotional guy. I didn't want him to see me cry, but I'm choked up, boy, I'm swallowing hard. And I said, I love you too, buddy. I really do.
I'm gonna tell you, Ed is like the father I lost. Our friendship means just that much. My dad was named Eddie, and then I meet a guy named Ed.
It's been amazing how much our friendship has grown. We've worked together 4, 5, 6 hours a day and worked side by side, and in the process got to know each other. And in getting to know each other, we discovered that in so many ways our lives are a lot alike.
Ed is a true friend, and I cherish him.
I consider him a great friend. I value his friendship. He cares about me, and I care about him. And I wouldn't trade that friendship for anything.
I've been searching within myself to try to connect all of this and what God mean by putting me and Ed together. I know that God don't let people intersect in your life by accident. God put Ed here for a reason. And he put me in Ed's life for a reason. What's the reason for that? I have no idea yet, but I know it's a good thing. And I am so happy. You can find a friend in the most unlikely places, even a cemetery. So be careful, look around, take no one for granted, because you never know why God intersect that person in your life.
Is that amazing? Wow. Man, is that amazing? Man, oh man, oh man. Man, when he told me that story, he said, Ed, he'd worked in the cemetery for 8 months without telling anybody. And to see all those poinsettias in the cemetery, I mean, that place was a mess. And then, do you see how beautiful they got it looking? They put those poinsettias out there for every grave, over 200 graves. And he put those, and then on Memorial Day, they put flags out. I mean, just because God made him do it. You know, it's just, I asked him, I said, Ed, why didn't you quit? He said, well, I tried to quit. I went up there and sat on the headstone, which, by the way, I don't think that's okay. And he sat on the headstone, and I told the Lord, I said, he says to me, he said, I told the Lord, I said, why do you have me coming back here? I have met nobody. I know nobody. Nobody's going to know if I quit because nobody knows if I'm here. The only people who know I'm here are dead. So it's like... So he'd go home, resign to not come back, and God would just make him come back so he could meet Martin. Let me introduce my friend, Ed Vaughn, and his wife, Karen, right down here. Oh, man. Pull yourself together, Ed. Hey, here's the deal. That's what it looks like to follow God. I don't know how long I'm coming to this cemetery. I don't know why I'm here. All I know is this. God made me come. And look at the beautiful stories that have come out of this and the example. You know, it's just, that's what it looks like to follow Jesus in an unknown place to get a life you could not have put together for yourself. And I want that for you. I want that for me. I want to live my life like that. God, where would you have me go? So we're going to help Ed. Here's what we're going to do. On February the 2nd, we're going to have a serve day out at the cemetery. There's 2 different shifts, one starting in the morning, one starting in the afternoon. You can sign up outside, in the lobby, or you can just text. We want you to use your phone, text, and then you'll get text the word cleanup to 68398, and you'll get a form. You can sign up for that. And we want you to sign up to help. There is so much. There's about 1/4 of an acre still that's totally overgrown, got trash in it. We're taking dumpsters out there. We're going to make this place look great. It's called Pleasant Green Cemetery, and it's associated with Pleasant Green Baptist Church, which moved because they couldn't stay on that ground on that deal, so they built themselves a new place. The pastor and their church came last night to our service. It was a beautiful thing. And Mark was here last night too, so that was a beautiful thing. And so we want you to be a part of this if you want to. We can only take about 150, 175 volunteers, but sign up. Get on this. Here's the other thing we're going to do so everybody can participate. When you leave today, we're going to have ushers at the door, and we're going to ask you to donate the cash you got, or some cash. You've got a lot of cash. Yeah, do that. And 100% of this money that you donate goes to the Pleasant Green Cemetery Restoration Fund so we can do something in our community. And we're doing this on all 3 campuses, and we're going to make this place a place of pride. Weren't you touched when Ed said, I just couldn't think about how disrespectful it was. He had no idea who owned that cemetery, who was buried there. He just did what God had him to do. And I want you to be part of that in some ways. So when you leave today, cough it up, man, because we're going to make a difference over there. And I hope you're encouraged today to not take your cues from the world and not think you know it all, but let Jesus move you into the unknown and see what could happen in your life. I'm so thrilled with Ed's story. I want a story like that too. Let's pray together. Will you pray with me? Father in heaven, thank you so much for Ed. We're thankful for his faith. We thank you for men like Martin Luther King. We're thank you so much for his courage to step across these racial barriers that the world had said was okay, and he said it wasn't. We thank you for Jesus, who started the whole thing by reaching across nationalities to touch a lady that was in isolation and shame. He removed that so she could have a life. So I pray that you would indeed touch us all, that we might have the courage to follow you. May we make a difference in our world as light and salt because we follow Jesus. And we pray all this in his name. Amen. Hey, there's folks down front that would love to pray with you and encourage you. The ushers are at the doors. I'm going to be out in the lobby with my wife, Lisa. I'd love to meet you. God bless you. Have a great day.